Podcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. It's my pleasure to welcome everyone to the Diabetes Sisters Life Class webinar, Let's Get Organized, the Key to Successful Diabetes Management. Happy New Year to everyone, and thank you for joining us on our first webinar this year. My name is Anna Norton, and I'm the CEO of Diabetes Sisters. I will also be moderating today's webinar. I am so excited to welcome a wonderful friend to Diabetes Sisters in our community. Susan Weiner is the owner of Susan Weiner Nutrition. She is the 2015 AADE Diabetes Educator of the Year and the 2016 Dare to Dream honoree of the Diabetes Research Institute Foundation. Her column, Diabetes in Real Life, is featured monthly in Endocrine Today, and she is the 2017 co-chair of the Advanced Practice Communities of Interest for the American Association of Diabetes Educators. Her extensive work with people living with diabetes is priceless to our community. She serves on various advisory boards, including ours, and she is the co-author of The Complete Diabetes Organizer, Your Guide to a Less Stressful and More Manageable Diabetes Life, as well as Diabetes 365 Tips for Living Well. I'd like to welcome Susan to lead us the next half hour on the key to successful diabetes management. Susan, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Anna. And I have to say, I'm looking at the screen now, and I don't see the slides up on my screen. Are they showing?
They are showing.
Okay, I don't see them, but I do have them printed out, so I'm going to go by that. I don't know why it's showing, so I apologize. And I'm so glad to be here today. Thank you so much for having me. There we go. And now I see them. So hi, everybody, and a very happy 2017 to everybody listening today. How to get organized with diabetes. Next slide, please. And the slide after this. We all know about me. So the late great professor and wonderful CDE, Dr. Richard Rubin, came up with the term diabetes overwhelmness to describe the continuous demands of diabetes and the nonstop flow of information that you all receive when you first get diagnosed with diabetes. Just think about it. Why is diabetes self-care management so difficult for many people with diabetes? It's probably a question that most of us think about every day and several times a day because diabetes is such a demanding disease and it's there all the time, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. These demands are continuous and they're often unpleasant, whether it's taking shots, doing finger sticks, lifestyle changes. There's just so many challenges. Next slide, please. So I do agree with Dr. Richard Rubin that diabetes overwhelmness is a real problem, but rather than it becoming an effective barrier to self-care behaviors, what are we going to do about it? So has anybody listening today, I know I can't see your hands, but raise them anyway, have you ever watched the TV show Hoarding, Buried Alive? I'll bet a lot of people have seen this program at one time or another, or one that's very similar to it. Hoarding is a compulsive psychological disorder when a person becomes obsessively focused on purchasing, acquiring, searching, and saving a bunch of items that have little or no value. And the behavior of hoarding has very, very bad effects, both emotional and physical, and additional effects, social, financial, even legal, for hoarders and for family members. And one day, the co-author of my book, the Diabetes Organizing book, Leslie Josell, called me. She's a friend of mine, and she's like, I'm going to be the professional organizer on the Hoarding show tonight. Tune in. So I'm watching the show, and the person who's on the show is being shown on this slide. He was an Elvis impersonator from Brooklyn, New York. And it hit me. If Leslie is able to organize this person who was deep in chronic disorganization, deep in chronic disorganizing issues, certainly with certain tools, tips, and strategies, we could help people with diabetes get a little bit more organized. Ding, ding, ding. That may be one of the keys to diabetes self-care. Next slide, please. So we had a person, this Elvis impersonator, who was buried alive in all his things and all his stuff. And many of the people who were featured on this hoarding program, I think 3 or 4 of them actually over time, did have type 2 diabetes, at least in the ones that I saw. I'm not sure if anybody had type 1 diabetes, but I did see some people with type 2 diabetes. So if we're able to organize these people's lives and help them kind of get organized in their lives so that they could take better care of themselves and prepare healthier meals and schedule their appointments and manage their medical paperwork, we could definitely do better with our diabetes self-management. Next slide, please. So a person who has chronic disorganizing issues, chronic disorganization issues that affect their life, that's a serious disorder, and the hoarding pictures that I showed are really an exaggerated form, when I'm trying to explain this, of what most people go through. But think about this of when you were diagnosed with diabetes. Perhaps you were previously very organized in your life. Before your diabetes diagnosis, maybe you had things, although stressful, under control. You were able to organize your home situation, your work situation, your relationships, taking care of children, grandparents, parents, pets, whatever it was. But now when you throw diabetes into the situation, you might become disorganized. And that's called situational disorganization. So take a minute, take a deep breath, and think about it. Do you now have organizing challenges after your diabetes diagnosis that affect the quality of your daily life? And maybe some people listening today also do have some chronic disorganizing issues. Are you feeling very overwhelmed, like Dr. Richard Rubin described, with diabetes overwhelmness and everything that goes along with diabetes self-care? And this is really important, and it kind of comes to light with some people who are now situationally disorganized. Is your home safe, clean, and functional? Now, why do I say this? So many times we're wondering, well, we're giving people with diabetes and other chronic health conditions all the tools that you may need, let's just say to prepare a healthy meal. But if your kitchen is completely disorganized and you can't find your pots and pans, or your counters are cluttered and there's no place to chop and dice, for example, then you can't prepare healthy meals, which are required to help you manage your daily diabetes self-care. If you can't find any quick-acting, fast-acting sources of carbohydrate, if you're treating a low blood sugar, then that's a problem with your diabetes self-care management. So I think that organization is the key to many diabetes management issues. Next slide, please. So think about, as we talk about some of the tools and strategies that can help with organizational skills, how it can help you or someone you love with diabetes improve your daily life, and how it can improve your long-term diabetes management. Next slide, please. So this is really important. This is a conversation that I have with other healthcare providers all the time. We don't do diabetes perfect, right? And we definitely don't organize perfect. We don't organize perfect, but we do organize enough. And this picture cracks me up because it's a picture of being overly organized, which we're not. It's just to make a point. Don't feel overwhelmed, going back to that term, diabetes overwhelmness, and being overwhelmed in your life. Don't be overwhelmed with the process of organizing everything at once. Just like you're trying to improve one diabetes self-care behavior at a time, let's talk about how to improve one organizing behavior at a time. One little thing at a time can add up to huge changes, and does add up to huge changes. We all don't believe in New Year's resolutions, pretty much because they don't work by the time January 3rd or 4th comes around, right? So small changes is really what leads to bigger outcomes. Next slide, please. One of the best ways that everybody could start today, so everyone take out, let's go old-fashioned, let's go old school, a pen and paper and write things down, or to take some notes on your computer or even the notes section of your phone, because this is an important one to remember. Writing things down work. Use checklists. Checklists are for remembering so you can use your brain for thinking. If you write something down, you're using a tool to take the stress off your brain to remember. When you have diabetes, you have so much to do during the day. If you write things down and check them off, not only will you feel accomplished, but you take the pressure off remembering. Next slide, please. They're not silly. They're very, very useful. So what can we use checklists for? Well, one thing that's great is to use a supply checklist. You can write down all the supplies that you need for your daily care, not only for your diabetes self-care, but for all aspects of your life. If you need to write down a checklist of what to bring with you to school, to work, for the day ahead, for activities you're doing, writing it down and checking it off takes the pressure off you for forgetting something that you will need to feel good throughout the day, to help you manage and influence your blood sugar during the day. I don't use the words control blood sugar anymore because you can't always control your broken pancreas. If there's one thing I know about diabetes, it's unpredictable. So the word control does not work for me anymore. But the best that we can influence our blood sugar can help us feel better and help manage our blood sugars throughout the day. Make a list for what you may need to use for daily use, and even make a checklist of what you keep in storage for backup supplies. Very important. I love the idea of a command central for different supplies in different areas of your house. For example, you may decide to keep all your diabetes checking supplies when you're checking your blood sugar in one area, in your kitchen or in your bedroom or someplace where you know where everything is, so that you don't have to look for different parts of it. The same is true at your place of employment to keep things together. Next slide, please. So these supply categories that you keep a checklist for can be for supplies you need several times a day, supplies that are easily reached, keeping things together, for example, that are for checking your blood sugar, or again, for fast-acting sources of carbohydrate, supplies that need refrigeration, like insulin, for example. You may have a supply category for things you want to keep out of reach of children, for extra storage, and for travel. Next slide. And another really great takeaway, how many of you have been to a library lately? For the younger people listening, that's the big building that has hard-covered books in it. Think like a library and group like with like. This is another fabulous organizing technique. In a library, books are grouped according to being like. For example, cookbooks are in one section, children's books are in one section, fiction books are in one section. Like books are grouped with like, so you can find them easily. If you were ever looking for something in your closet, like a pair of shoes that you were thinking of, and they were not in a part of your closet where you can find them, or grouped in an area that you can find them, you're never going to locate them. So just like you would group your winter clothes together if you live in an area that has different seasons, and your summer clothes together, group your like supplies together and group your like foods together in your pantry, refrigerator, and freezer so you can find them. Next slide, please. It's so hard for us, even those of us who are morning people, to get up in the morning and get organized. And I want to point out to all my friends listening today at Diabetes Sisters, I love this alarm clock, this analog clock because it's orange, which is the color of Diabetes Sisters. So I use orange analog clocks in all my presentations so I can share this as a shout out to my friends at Diabetes Sisters. So if you look at this analog clock, it's the opposite of a digital clock. So on a digital clock, you'd see time ticking slowly in the morning, like 6:01, 6:02, 6:03. That does nothing for us when we want to get out of bed in the morning. When you use an analog clock, such as this one, you can see the sweep of time, and it makes people just get up and get organized a little bit more. It really helps to keep analog clocks in different rooms of the house. Even keep one in your bathroom and in your kitchen and in your bedroom so you can watch the sweep of time and become more organized, especially during those precious morning minutes when you have so much to do and you have diabetes. Next slide, please. So this is an example of a slide that you really shouldn't use in a presentation because there's so much on the slide. So it makes the point of how much we have to do to help manage our diabetes on a daily basis and in the morning. I'm not going to read off everything here in the interest of time, but I'm sure if I gave you a few minutes, you could add another 10 things to this checklist. And in order to do these things right, to set you up for a great day ahead, we want to add minutes to that morning time. Let's look at the next slide and see how we can do that. Preparing the night before is the #1 greatest thing that you can do because those morning minutes are precious and they're finite. The morning time does not extend as long as we'd like it to extend. And even if you're tired the night before, that time, usually you have a little bit more time at night, that time can be extended just a little bit. So we know the typical things of laying out your clothes, your kids' clothes, anybody's clothes the night before that needs to be done. We also know about preparing breakfast, lunch, and snacks the night before, very important. But I love the idea of a launching pad. So you see those little bags hung up right on those hooks that I have on the slide? The night before, put everything you need to leave for the next morning except what's refrigerated that you have to bring with you in that bag on the launching pad. And it doesn't have to be necessarily a diabetes-friendly bag, although it could be one of the wonderful products from a number of different companies that make them you can use. But whatever you like to use should be there, whether it's a backpack, a purse, a tote bag, whatever it is. And on that launching pad by the door where you're exiting your home, you won't forget anything. And again, it takes the pressure off. It takes the overwhelming stress that we feel on a daily basis with diabetes off if you don't forget anything. And that would include your keys or anything else that you need for the day. Next slide, please. Getting up, getting organizing, and going in the morning, we can do that also by setting some of our tasks to music. I love this idea because music is very calming. And let's face it, some of the tasks with managing diabetes is not always fun and calming. So think about this. Make a playlist in the morning of 3 or 4 songs that you really enjoy. Set your morning to music. Wake up to your first song playing, and you enjoy the song. You also know the song well because you're familiar with it. And when it's about, during the time of the song and towards the time when it's going to end is the time you need to get out of bed in the morning. And perhaps during that time, if you wear a CGM, a continuous glucose monitor, check your CGM at that time. Test your blood, check your blood sugar at that time as well. When the first song ends and you're out of bed, move on to your second task. Maybe it's using the bathroom, again, where there's also an analog clock. Maybe it's grooming. By the time the third song is on, you're dressed, you're walking towards the kitchen to eat your breakfast. It will add more precious minutes to your morning time when you have this routine down and when you make it just a little bit more pleasant. Next slide, please. This is not a picture of my kitchen. I don't know whose kitchen this is a picture of, but this certainly is a picture of how to organize things in your pantry, how to group like with like in your pantry, and also using clear containers so that you can see through them. Like I said before, so many people with diabetes are educated, many to a large extent, on the importance of eating healthy and eating good meals and eating home more often. But why aren't you doing it? Could it be that your kitchen is disorganized? Next slide, please. The other really big benefit of having an organized kitchen is not having to deal with duplicate purchases. If you can't find something and you go back to purchase it again, that can be a real problem. If you're preparing a healthy recipe, you can't find what you need to find in there, that's a problem for preparing the healthy recipe. Does clutter on your countertops or not being able to find your cookware make food preparation a problem? That can be an issue as well. And here is a really important slide. So everybody out there, I want to ask you, is your kitchen organized by where things are fitting, where you stuff them in after food shopping, or by use, how important things are to use during meal preparation or cooking preparation or when you're making your favorite recipe? So when you come home and if you've purchased a can of beans, for example, and you stick it in the black hole in the back of your pantry, you're probably never going to use it and you're going to forget that you even bought it. Next slide, please. So remember when next time you go food shopping to organize by the way you're using something, to keep like things with like all your seasonings and spices together, and not by fit. I've also included in the presentation a few apps to use for the kitchen. These are updated every day, as everybody knows. So these are not necessarily at all of them out there, but just a couple of them in case any of you are interested in using apps for organizing your kitchen. Next slide. And I know that we're running out of time, so I want to just cover a couple of points on decluttering and organizing your kitchen. I came up with the acronym SPACE because I want you to have more of it. The first thing everybody should do when you're thinking about organizing, and remember, we just organize enough. We don't organize perfect. Sort out what you have in your kitchen. Just look through everything you have, and then purge or get rid of what you don't need, even if that means to donate. If there's something you have a duplicate of that somebody else can use, please give it away. That's the way to really organize your kitchen and to help someone at the same time. Once you sort everything out and you get rid of or donate what's broken or chipped or you don't want anymore, now it's time to assign. For example, if you still have your Christmas china out where you should be having your pots and pans that you're using for daily use, assign it to a different area of your home. Box it up, label it, and put it somewhere where you can find it. The turkey platter for Thanksgiving does not need to be kept with your everyday pots and pans. The fun and pretty stuff is containerizing, but really don't break the bank on it. Purchase what you need in clear, stackable, vertical containers in the dollar store. And make sure that you're able to equalize to maintain a system. In the interest of time, I'm going through this quickly, but know that I can spend an hour just on this slide talking about different ways to go through the SPACE acronym. Next slide, please. Grouping together, we've kind of discussed grouping like with like, but here's a lovely picture of it. Next slide. Using different organizing tools in your kitchen are fantastic. This is a lazy Susan, which doesn't describe me today, I could tell you that, but it's great. And one of the great tidbits I can give you about using a lazy Susan, and they do make some for the refrigerator as well, is you can turn these around so the food nutrition facts label is facing out, and you can easily read what's in that condiment or food. Next slide, please. Try to keep the items that you're using most often in what I like to call your prime real estate. Any area between your shoulders and your knees. That's where you can reach it most easily. That means keeping your junk food or those sometimes foods on a really high shelf where it's harder to get to, so you don't see it every time you open up your pantry, refrigerator, and freezer. Next slide, please. When you're ready to restock your refrigerator, take an inventory of what's already in there to avoid duplicate purchases. Next slide. And as we talked about, use clear plastic containers because you want to see what's in there. Clear is king when it comes to storage. Next slide. I love this. Use a clear plastic shoe bag to corral your diabetes supplies or to put carb-counted snacks in. This is using what's called vertical space. You could hang it on the back of any door in your home so you can see it and find it easily, and it doesn't take up counter space. Next slide. We're not going to have much time to go through travel, so let's go to the next slide, please. Just want you to all remember to use a travel checklist and to take the remembering out of remembering by telling someone who you're traveling with if you have diabetes, and to set alerts and reminders on your cell phone so that you have a visual cue. Next slide. And the next slide, please. Organizing medical paperwork is something that none of us really look forward to, but try to keep it as close as possible in a reference and current methods of documentation. Next slide. Just to summarize a little bit about paperwork, I tell people to use a date that everyone has to abide by, which is April 15th. Everybody celebrates tax day, right? So use that as a date for old data and new data, reference and current documents. Next slide. And either file it away using paper, next slide, or go paperless and digital. But you don't have to just use one or the other. You can use different strategies for different ways that you want to organize your medical paperwork. And I'm sure that I can do a follow-up webinar, life class at another time to go through the paperwork organizing in a lot more detail. Next slide. So just remember, there are apps for paperwork, apps for kitchen, apps for organizing, next slide, that you can use. And we're almost done. This was like an agility test for a half an hour, right? Next slide, please. I want everyone to remember that if you do get a little bit more organized to do your diabetes must-do, that will give you a lot more time to do your diabetes want-tos and things that have nothing to do with diabetes that you want to do. So remember some of the things that we talked about. Get organized, improve those kitchen space, your kitchen space by using some of the techniques and strategies we talked about today. Keep track of your medical paperwork. Next slide, please. And remember, you don't have to organize perfect. You just have to organize enough. Thank you so much for the opportunity to spend some time with you guys today. I so enjoyed it.
Thank you, Susan. Always so great to hear your voice and to see you whenever we get a chance to. We're actually out of time, so we don't have time to take any questions, but if anyone has any questions for Susan, I urge you to send them to info@diabetessisters.org, and we'll be able to forward those to Susan. Before we sign off, I wanted to thank everyone for registering and for participating in today's webinar. For our first of the year, we had over 70 people register, and as promised, we've taken all of the names and entered them into a drawing to win a copy of Susan's book, The Complete Diabetes Organizer, Your Guide to a Less Stressful and More Manageable Diabetes Life. The winner is Shayna Usher, so congratulations, Shayna. We'll be contacting you sometime later today so that we can send you your prize. And I invite each and every one of you to join us next month, Wednesday, February 8th at 4 o'clock Eastern Standard Time on our next live class webinar on heart health. Thank you again for tuning in. See you next month.